to Peter is always such a joy. We were sitting up here just chatting before we began, and that could have been a panel in itself. You are one of the most fascinating, knowledgeable people I know, and I'm not just gushing because I'm sitting here with you.
Thank you.
But it's so true, and I appreciate so much the energy and life that you bring to classicism. You make it very exciting, very beautiful, and just thinking about you, I think about trips to your office, which I've visited a few times, where you can see how much goes into every project. And I'm just fascinated by the fact that you have everything from this library, where once you showed me a pop-up book of the plans for the Brighton Pavilion.
Yes, the garden plans, yes.
Which is an extraordinary thing, but then everything to like the most high-tech 3D laser printers, like 3D printing that you can make up all kinds of different woodwork and panels. I just love that you're using all of these tools to create these wonderful projects.
Well, we're having fun and we keep pushing it further. Although last week, someone emailed me and asked if we could design a cathedral in the metaverse. And I had to go online and Google, what's the metaverse?
Well, you'll have to let us know when that happens.
Okay,
I have no doubt that you can quickly figure it out.
I'm not sure we're going to take the assignment. I was worried that the fee might be virtual too.
Well, here we're talking about a very real house, Rowdy Meadow, which you've done such a beautiful job at combining everything. The house speaks as like one language into itself. There's art, interior design, landscape, and then, of course, architecture, all coming together on one incredible property.
Right. No, it's an unusual thing to get to handle all aspects of a project like this.
And it's in the Czech-Cubist style, which I do not know very much about and hadn't been exposed to it before seeing the project and reading your beautiful book on it. How did you become exposed to this style?
So our client, we were designing a house, and it was looking more like traditional arts and crafts. And our client took a break from the project and came back and said, I'd like you to make this related to a style called Czech-Cubism, which I'd never heard of. But I had seen buildings with my friend Gregory Gilmartin, who's the designer in my office, in Prague in 1985, and it turned out I'd forgotten we actually bought books about it, so we were able to study up on it. But it only lasted for 6 years, from 1908 to 1914. So actually, no one has heard about it.
So that isn't really a style that you're known for. What is your firm known for?
Yeah.
What do people come to you for?
Well, I mean, I think we get pigeonholed as classicists, which means people think I'm going to inflict columns on them all the time, which I don't. I don't normally do, especially not in New York apartments. But we're known for classical architecture and traditional architecture. So some of the projects that people seem to be most interested in are like this house, which is a classical villa for a woman who collects decorative arts, 19th century paintings, and wanted something that might have combined the influence of Robert Adam and Duncan Phyfe. This is the upstairs stair hall in this house, and it really is a gallery for her paintings and sculpture. It has north light and it has skylight, and this was taken some 8 years ago. It now has much more art. And in fact, she has a huge sculpture of Abraham Lincoln against the railing. He barely fits, but it's a collector's house. But before people pigeonhole me, I can tell you that I've also had some unusual or perhaps unexpected clients, including early on, we worked in the Warhol factory, and we also did things like Keith Haring's shop, which is a few years ago, it was demolished, but it lasted a good while on Lafayette Street, called the Pop Shop. And I didn't use moldings, needless to say. I just created a lot of surfaces for him to paint on. I told him it probably wasn't a good idea to paint on the floor because his customers would walk on it, but he didn't listen to me. So.
And how did that work out?
You know what? He wasn't actually, he didn't feel like he could pay the whole fee, so he painted my car with graffiti as part of the fee. And that made it a memorable relationship.
And where's that car now?
Oh, it is painful. I sold it, and it's now in a museum.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yeah. And so, yeah.
And so we talked a little bit before, so this project is done in the Czech-Cubist style.
Right, so this is just another one of our other projects. It's just to show that we work with collectors. So this is a new, totally new formed apartment not far from here that has a new stair that you can see in the distance, and clearly the Basquiat is on the left, and the Lanz sheep are sort of grazing in the foyer. And we love them, and we love working with art. And actually, they have a little poodle that likes to nestle on top of the art, which is inappropriate considering the $1 million price tag on the dog bed. Okay.
And now we come to the
Now-
Czech.
now
I
we-
mean, I'm very eager to get to it, clearly.
So traveling in Prague, I noticed that all the architecture is extremely, a lot of it bizarre, or doesn't fit into the typical art history survey class of the progression of styles. For example, this is Gothic tracery, which is supposed to follow the lines of the vaults and emphasize the structural integrity in Gothic architecture, but in fact, being in Prague, the tracery is just sort of cut off and flying around like it was done by Jackson Pollock. And then we discovered Czech-Cubist villas. This is by Joseph Chokol, 1913. Right at the end of that period, and it's angular, it's unusual, it's symmetrical. It's not cubist in the sense of a deconstructed image, but it's full of crystalline planes. And even, well, they call it a tenement there, but this is a small apartment house where the angles are all sort of fluid and following from all the way to the ground up to this angled fringe at the top of the building, which you could hardly call a cornice. So the geometry is really complicated and I think quite beautiful. And I think this is what captivated our client's eye.
It's so intriguing.
And it's
And unlike anything else.
No, it's unlike anything, but it takes a great deal of discipline. It's not like it's geometry about the in sort of inner strength of the architecture emerging. Now I'm going to sound new agey. I don't mean to be that, but there it is.
And here's the house, Rowdy Meadow. So I would imagine you start by sort of siting this house, and this is on, what, 150, almost 150 acres?
Right, so it's a 150-acre place. It was farms, it was apple orchards, and we came after the landscape architect started. That was Reed Hildebrand, a well-known firm from Boston that does museums. They had already identified one end of a large open area which looks south to apple orchards. And we've decided we'd like to put it on the highest point for the best views. And this also allowed us to hide the cars and everything underneath. So it's built up so that the art gallery and the cars are all tucked away and you barely see where the cars enter. And that allowed us to have a house that's seen from 4 directions where the elevations are all perfectly resolved and symmetrical, as opposed to a more typical planning for houses when you have a garage wing or sort of a kitchen wing where things get more relaxed. This house is symmetrical on all sides.
It's in Ohio?
It's near Cleveland. And so the house is built and the collection and the sculpture park for a family, but it is deeded to the Cleveland Art Museum when the client dies, so it will be open to the public at some point.
It's a work of art, so that
Thank you.
makes absolute sense. And here we see some details that really express how you've drawn out the Czech Cubist style.
Right, so I mean the chimneys, the way they're grouped, someone said they look like artillery. They're a little aggressive looking, but they're faceted. So instead of getting flat 90-degree corners, you get angles, and you get things that are more, I'd say, angular and faceted, and there are no curves in any of the moldings on the house. This is the entrance, and so these are just a series of folded planes. We call it the frontispiece, which is just a way of saying it's the architecture around the door. And it slides up, and the roof, which is black slate, slides behind it. So I think of it as almost like an expressionist iceberg that's hovering in front of the house. And we also look at some details that are Cubist, but also influenced by some of the Art Deco skyscrapers in New York. These metal panels are called spandrel panels. You can see them all over the city, and they're above the window and below the window. So they fill in that space, and you can make sculptural patterns in them. We have gears in this one. The client's an industrialist, so we thought he wouldn't mind.
I love it. I feel like you just don't see, really intricate details
Right.
like this on houses anymore.
So there's the front of the house again. Reed Hildebrand planted trees on either side of it and hedges. As an architect, I don't mind having a house partially obscured by trees. I don't think it's a good idea to insist that all that be pulled back from, from the house. And then there are the various cars, of course.
There's such a pitch on the roof.
Yes, so the roof is tall. We went to the town and asked them if we could make the house taller. Because most houses in America are limited to 35 feet, which is really sort of ranch house height. And since this is not visible from any neighbor, they let us do it, and it allowed us to have this more prominent roof, which are topped by the lightning rods in the form of these prickly stars, which the client called death stars, but but they do serve as lightning rods.
Imagine those were fun to design.
Those were fun. Yes, those were fun.
Here we see, the extensive grounds, but some of the art that's throughout the property and part of the landscape.
Right, so there are 35 or so artists who participated in the sculpture park, and some of them did more than one piece. And the question is, well, how does that work? Well, the land has a lot of ravines and topography, so the art is located in a way that you don't sort of see one piece from the other. We were interested in connecting the pieces that we saw near the house to the architecture. So in the distance, you see a Saul LeWitt sculpture, that sort of stepped pyramid, and closer is the end of the swimming pool we designed, which was based on images from Carlo Scarpa, the Italian sculptor and architect. But the blocks of granite on our pool, we think, relate to the Saul LeWitt. And in fact, it turned out that the client bought the Saul LeWitt thinking it reminded him of his swimming pool, which is kind of the other way around.
I love that story.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful...
So here's the Saul LeWitt. It's really beautiful. And when you buy a LeWitt, you essentially, as I understand it, get a license to create it. So we had the Amish masons out there for weeks setting these blocks just so.
And then let's move inside the house.
Right.
Oh, and there we are inside
There we
the
are.
house.
There we are. Yes.
And how did you bring, I know that there's a lot, or not a lot, but there's some information on what the Czech-Cubist style is when it comes to exteriors, but interiors-wise, there wasn't.
Right. In the short years that their style was around, no one actually commissioned any of these young architects to go whole hog and do the inside of a house. So Gregory Gilmartin really had to think about how to bring this angularity into the house. The ceiling here has 158 different planes, and those are all prefabricated and then assembled. And those soft sculptures are actually the lights, and they are kinetic. They open and close and go up and down softly. And I think it's an interesting effect against the ceiling, which is kind of prickly and angular.
Beautiful. What a room. And how do we see the influence here?
Well, the living room is more conventional. Not every room in the house has all the angles, but it does have those little tiny blocks you see in the ceiling panels, and that was really based on more like a house in Paris, a maison particulier, that kind of paneling the ceiling. And then there's a mantelpiece that you see out of the striped block of stone that we designed that's definitely Czech-Cubist. And then it has, furniture, the Royer chairs. On the left, the chair that I called the Michelin Man is actually Eileen Gray's Bibendum chair.
And I love that table so much. It's
Isn't that
beautiful with the
amazing?
lapis.
Yeah, yeah.
And here's one of the hallways, which I just love how you've created these amphithéâtres with such an interesting shape.
Right, so you enter the house at the side, and then you come through from room to room and sort of look back through at the view. And this is one of the most extraordinary pieces of furniture. This is Coard's Canapé Gondal, which was the star of the Jazz Age show, which some of you may remember at the Cooper Hewitt. It was the show about Art Deco furniture. And those are Walter von Nessen torchairs and Prince side tables. So all the furniture is really interesting. and we were lucky to get to work with it. And all we had to do, so that the canopé came from Paris, it went to our upholsterer, we had it upholstered, and then it went to the museum. It was delivered here, and within 2 days, the golden retriever was sleeping on it.
And so is that a theme in your work?
That's a theme, yes, comfort. Everyone should feel comfortable.
In this extraordinary cabinet.
Yeah, so sometimes when you create a symmetrical space in an octagonal room, this is actually 10-sided, decitagonal, I forget how to say it. Anyway, you end up with these blind niches because not every opening could be a door or a window. So this blind niche turned out to be a perfect place to put this, at first glance, simple-looking painted cabinet. I mean, it really looks simple, right? But it's actually designed by Koloman Moser for the Wittgenstein family. And it has an extraordinarily beautiful inlay with lapis and silver on the front of it. Again, this is a Rietveld side table that was designed in 1913 and then not actually made until 1970, which is kind of odd. That's another story. But having all these interstitial little halls between the rooms was perfect for collections because you have a wall that you could sort of arrange with the Rietveld and then see what art worked with it.
And even the light, like the art, the light, it's all having this wonderful conversation.
Yeah, the light really works for a lot of this.
And this is an extraordinary room.
So this turns out to be the most popular room in the house. It's a screened porch. Those are screens. In the winter, they're glass panels that go in, but it basically is an indoor-outdoor room. And the mosaics are actually Moroccan. They're Zilich mosaics, but they're set in patterns that remind us of Koloman Moser and Otto Wagner. So our client said it's like Secession meets the Kasbah.
Right, sounds like a party.
Right, and I mean the furniture is all, the table is interesting. It was carved out of walnut in Kabul, Afghanistan, by our friends at Turquoise Mountain, by a carver who actually came to the United States for an exhibit that they had of his work at the Smithsonian. So that's every piece here has a special story.
And the dining table.
The dining table is one of my favorites. So this dining table he purchased before we really started drawing much of the house at all. It came from Argentina. Jean-Michel Frank designed it for the Bourne family there. Solid pear wood. And so it came here and it took a lot of coaxing to acclimate it. But it's a really interesting table. And the curves at the end inspired the forms of the architecture. You can't quite see, but the walls are curved at the end so that it has all these curved elements.
And I love the fireplace in this dining room.
Fabulous. So the fire, that's from one block of marble that I found near Pietrasanta, Italy, and the frame around it, that metal thing, sort of seemed like a grill of an old Bentley or Rolls Royce.
Okay, the next question on my list, on my sheet right now, just sounds absolutely ridiculous when I read it. Does any of the furniture in this house have an extraordinary story behind it?
No.
Because it seems like everyone does, but I know we have some really special ones here.
Right, so that, it's hard to see it here, but this is Eileen Gray's amazing creation called the Lit Persan, the Persian daybed. And when it came from Europe, and when it first arrived, I noticed there were cracks in the frame. I'm not a conservator, but I realized that you shouldn't let your friends just plop down on this. So we built a hidden steel platform underneath so you could actually sit on it without damaging it. And then the research revealed that it originally had a sable blanket, which would have been 8 feet by 6 feet, which the furrier told us would cost $500,000, so that seemed kind of problematic. So I don't want to upset anyone but it's made of coyote from near our house in Millbrook. I won't tell you how I got them. And this one is an amazing find by the dealer, my friend Louis Bofferding. The mirror was designed by Gio Ponti for the Venice exposition in 1928. No one knew what it was. Louis knew because he studies and has all the books, and as dealers do, become expert. But it was at Doyle, and I think he didn't pay much more than $1,500 for it. And we and he put it back together, and my client was happy to pay $150,000. And then the Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris wanted it for their Gioponti show, but we were just moving into the house, and I said, well, he's waited 3 years. You can't send it over now. But that was really one of those great stories.
All right, maybe for the next Ponte show that comes
Right,
up.
the next Ponte show.
And this house, as I've expressed before, is just every single detail is so thought out, and even the lighting, even the lights here are really of museum caliber.
Right, so some of the lighting is new, and some of it is, a lot of it is historic, and our office dealing with like the lampshades for these museum level lights was kind of a nightmare, but we got there. So this is Otto Wagner's 3-tiered light. It's 6 feet tall, so it happened to have a very good place to hang. But there was only one of them, and the architecture is symmetrical, so we had to commission another, and that involved a company in Vienna called Woka, but then there was also another man, also named Wolfgang, who wanted to do it, and so there was this embarrassing moment when we had 2 men, each named Wolfgang in Vienna, who thought they'd landed the commission. But it worked out.
And are they pretty close? Like when you look at
They're
them?
very close. There's a dimpled silver finish that was used in the Secession called alpaca, which is really beautiful. And they managed to perfect that. It's really good.
And I love this light as well.
So this is by a great New Yorker, American named Thaddeus Wolff, and he did this fixture and a lot of the sconces, both in and outside the house. So it's cast glass, and bronze, and it's just an extraordinary sculptural piece. And it sits in what we call the tribune. This is a circular opening into the room below at the entrance of the house. And it just works with the ceiling, and the drawings are cartoons for a frieze in the St. Louis Exposition in 1904.
Was it difficult to land on this light as being the right piece here? Did you?
You know, this was one that seemed to make total sense. There was another room where we could never seem to find anything or design anything that pleased our clients. So he insisted that we organize a competition, and we actually, a RISD student won the competition. I'll show you what that was later.
And this room, the entire room, is actually really a work of art in itself. And you commissioned and worked with a wonderful artist.
Right. So this is largely the work of an artist and sculptor, French-Swedish woman named Ingrid Dunat, who has a studio outside of Paris. Ingrid, we built the room, we designed the room, the windows, we designed the mantelpiece, and then we worked with her to transform what would have been all of our moldings and bookcases into her vernacular, which is these wonderful organic cast bronze sections, orange parchment walls, aluminum pierced ceiling, her carpet, just everything in the room is hers, even the chandelier.
And how did you land on this deep shade of orange? Was that part of the style?
Well, our client loves orange, and we first met Ingrid. We were in Paris. We went to the gallery called Carpenter's Workshop. They have a gallery here in New York too. And we were looking at furniture, and soon they opened the champagne, and it was 11 o'clock, and Mother appeared. So they hit it off.
No, her work is so beautiful, and there's this weight, but this beauty and intricacy.
It's
to all of
amazing.
the
Her
bronze.
textures, and that's a Sornay desk that we found in Paris. Yes, and just another view with her bookcases and the mantelpiece, which she was gracious enough to let us keep our mantelpiece in this room. And Yoshimoto Nara's girl on top.
She's great there.
She's great, right? And yes. And this is Frank Tomaselli's collage painting. These wonderful sculptures that are sort of floating orbs. Hiroshu Shuno orbs that kind of appear to be floating out of the painting, the collage, even though they're not even related artists. So Ingrid actually did the chair in bronze and the lamp in bronze, and it was quite a room.
And I feel like this project gave you such creative freedom. You were able to come up with so many wonderful ideas. But this entry is
Right.
really a wow.
So there's a room in the greatest Art Deco skyscraper on this island is arguably One Wall Street. Ralph Walker's One Wall Street. And the banking hall in that building was completed in 1930 by Hildreth Mayer. And it's all mosaics, and it's the same mosaics from the same manufacturer as these. And they're actually glass, they're not ceramic, except her room is gold and orange and red. So this is inspired by that room. And it was a really special commission. It's just kind of a dizzying space to be in. You walk right through it, it's just the entry to the house. The dunce caps are an artist named Maxwell. And then there's the light fixture that we can never get it right. So that's the student who won the 10,000 named Todd Anderson. And we had to help him figure out how to build it. Yeah.
And going through the book, oh wow, there it is.
Right, so there it is. I tell people, I hope you never have to lie down in the house, but if you're lying down, this is what you'd see.
And then going through the book and looking at the house, this is definitely something that stands out as very different and certainly not Czech-Cubist.
Right, so among the collections were a collection of labels from boxes of fireworks. So our office figured out how to have all these scanned and turned into wallpaper. And the light fixture is made by a local artist in the form of a very dangerous firecracker that no one should let their children get near, called an M80.
It's so witty and fun. I love it.
Yeah.
And then something I've always personally dreamed about, and something that we feature sometimes in gallery is,
right.
A house with its own art gallery.
Right, so this, I mean, you come down a stair that's sort of tucked under the main stair, and you discover you're on axis with this gallery. You step down because we wanted the gallery ceilings to be super tall, and the architecture is pretty simple, but you step through and beyond and around this amazing work by Doho So, which is actually all Korean military dog tags, and you make your way around and you come into a grotto, which then leads to the rest of the estate. But it's basically practical architecture. It has no moldings, it has adjustable lighting, and this entire wall opens up directly into the garage, so you can deliver almost like a loading dock major pieces of art into the room without having to move them at all. They just come in through the wall, and then the walls slide back.
All the things you need for big collectors,
Exactly.
Right?
So here we are, we stepped out onto the grotto, and we're standing at the level of the pool that you saw in an earlier piece. And
This is
not everyone's taste, but he asked us to design a fountain mask. So this is the Cubist Muse. It's actually a woman in the Cubist vision, carved in bronze. Hyde Park Moldings made this. And it's sort of the facing out of the grotto at the view.
Yes, you're part of the art collection.
There you go.
Oh, this is beautiful. So now we're back outside looking at the landscape.
Right, we're in the sculpture park.
In the sculpture park. And I mean, a lot of the sculpture here, not a lot, but there are a few pieces that you had to collaborate quite intensely with the artist on because there's an architectural component.
Right. I mean, I'd say this is one of the pieces that Andy Goldsworthy designed and built, which is, we weren't really so collaborating as we had to stamp drawings because the building department didn't think this was art. They thought it was architecture. So he took the original orchard as the subject of the entire piece. It's called Orchard, and built two huts. One is about winter and death, and one is about spring and life. This is built around a dead apple tree. He found white clay underground and coated everything with white clay. So it's sort of a memorializing this dead apple tree. And then the other one is about life, and these are all the preserved apples. So this is a rammed earth cellar with cubbies for the apples. And when you visit, you are allowed to eat the apple, right? Because it's just a renewing thing. So
they're real apples.
They're real. They are the apples from the orchard, and they're the same trees that were grown. and there are young trees and old trees and dead trees, and we tracked down the grandson of the original tender of the apple orchard, who knew the different kinds of trees. So it's a living thing. But he didn't want it perfected. He didn't want the dead trees removed or the young ones replaced by mature ones. And he insists that a video be sent every 6 months of what's going on there to make sure no one's messing with his orchard.
And this is another, a beautiful sculpture on the property.
Yes, so this is by the canoe is the art. So that's a sculpture in the form of a canoe on a bronze armature by Saint-Clair-Semin, the Brazilian artist. He's absolutely brilliant. And he had an idea for a pavilion because, you know, Casman sold him the sculpture, but then you have to build a pavilion to put your sculpture in. And so we worked with him. He had this basic form of the column, which we refined, and we were able to 3D print different versions of it, which was fun, and then put a roof on it, float it out, or it's not really floating, but place it in the pond so it looked like it was floating. This is a really happy collaboration.
It's absolutely gorgeous. And then
You can
all
skip
the credits,
over.
so many collaborators.
So that's just to say, this is all collaboration. My partner, Gregory Gilmartin, is the principal designer of what you're looking at, and then interiors and just a lot of other people. And the list should be longer. In the book, if we have a book called Rowdy Meadow, and it lists, I think, over 150 names because there were so many people involved. It's not the work of one person. So, and there we are looking back at the house. You can see the muse of Czech Cubism on the wall and framed by the arch. So.
And I mean, that pool is just so beautiful, and it just speaks so wonderfully to the way you leads your eye to the house.
It's fun, isn't it?
About it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you, Jackie.
To walk through this
This
house.
is fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was spectacular. I'm ready to move in myself,
Right.
if I could. I have just one question. Out of all the projects that you and your firm have embarked on, how would you rate this in terms of the complexity and I mean, it just seems monumental on every scale. I know other ones that you've done, I've heard, are also monumental, but in terms of, it just seems that there's so many different nuances to this. How did this compare to others?
Well, I mean, I think it's the most complicated one. We spent, we add up our hours as one has to, and we spent over 27,000 hours over the years on this project. So that's the measure of it. But it is a freestanding house, and it was built with a client who had endless patience and confidence in us, and wonderful contractors. The Amish carpenter who just was so involved and became so involved with the art that the client actually paid for them to be trained and certified as art movers for museum level art moving. So now they're the only Amish-owned art moving company in America. Wow. And we've had, city projects. We built a house for Jeff Koons and his family not far from here, and that was more complicated technically just because it's in the middle of a city block. But this is a lot of time and care.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes.
From the time the client contacted you and engaged you for the project until its completion, how many years did that take?
5 years. There was a little bit of a break at one point at the beginning, but 5 years. Yeah.
Anyone else?
No one else? What would you say would be the most surprising, either on this project or on any other project? I was listening to a discussion the other day, and someone said, like, what's your heaven and hell for this project? What was the heaven moment, and what was the hell moment?
I mean, I think it was when we learned that we had to accommodate a 26-foot tall column of basalt called the Figure of Death, which is a sculpture in the stair hall. We had to add steel and all that. And this happened with Jeff Kinsey, where you told us something very heavy is arriving. That's just technically, that's just technically difficult. And then, but what's the most surprising thing? I saw that the collection of Bridget Berlin is coming up for auction soon, and I realized that in the late 80s we designed a reliquary for the remains of Bridget Berlin's pugs that would have sat in the Warhol factory. They didn't build it.